The letter bomb, the assassination of Dele Giwa, and the day journalism died in Nigeria. In the early hours of Sunday, October 19, 1986, a man of words met his fate through an act of unspeakable violence. Dele Giwa, the co-founder and editor-in-chief of Newswatch magazine, was killed in his Lagos home by a parcel bomb. It was the first time in Nigerian history that such a method was used to silence a voice, and tragically, it worked. But who was Dele Giwa? Why was he targeted? And how did the Nigerian state respond to the murder of one of its most prominent journalists? This is not just a story of death, it's a story of truth, power, fear, and a nation's unresolved questions. Dele Giwa was born Sumonu Oladile Giwa on March 16, 1947, in Ilife, southwestern Nigeria. His father worked as a laundryman for Obafemi Awolowo University, and young Dele grew up surrounded by the hum of academia. His early years were modest, but he possessed a sharp intellect and a deep interest in literature and history. His path would eventually take him across the Atlantic, where he studied English and communications at Brooklyn College and later at Fordham University in New York. In America, Giwa was exposed to Western ideals of journalism, freedom of speech, investigative reporting, and the belief that the press is the watchdog of democracy. He returned to Nigeria in the 1970s, during an era of military regimes and media censorship, determined to transplant these ideals into the soil of his homeland. By the early 1980s, Dele Giwa had become one of Nigeria's most well-known journalists. He worked at the Daily Times and later at Sunday Concord, where his incisive writing earned him both admirers and enemies. But his crowning achievement came in 1984, when he co-founded Newswatch magazine along with Ray Eku, Dan Agbis, and Yakubu Mohammed. The magazine quickly rose to prominence for its hard-hitting investigations and fearless critiques of the military regime. Nigeria, at the time, was under the iron rule of General Ibrahim Babangida. Having seized power in a 1985 coup, Babangida presented himself as a reformer, a Maradona of politics, skilled at dodging opponents and outmaneuvering criticism. But behind the smooth facade was a government increasingly intolerant of dissent. Newswatch was one of the few media platforms brave enough to challenge the regime. It published critical reports on corruption, human rights abuses, and questionable economic policies like the Structural Adjustment Program, SAP, which many Nigerians saw as a foreign-imposed austerity scheme that deepened poverty and hardship. Giwa, in particular, became a thorn in the side of the military. His editorials were bold, sometimes satirical, and often biting. He once referred to the SAP as God's experiment gone wrong, a line that caught the attention of the State Security Service, SSS. By September 1986, tensions between Giwa and the security agencies had reached a boiling point. On September 19, he was summoned by the SSS for questioning. The reason? A story he had written and an alleged connection to leftist movements. Giwa reportedly told colleagues that he was being accused of plotting a socialist revolution. 3 days later, on September 22, he wrote a confidential letter to the Nigerian Inspector General of Police, expressing concern that the SSS was trying to frame him. He feared for his life. But in a country ruled by soldiers, the warning signs were ignored, dismissed as paranoia, or worse, met with silent approval. On October 16, 3 days before his death, Giwa was again interrogated, this time by Colonel Haliru Akilu and Lieutenant Colonel A.K. Togun, both senior intelligence officers. The meeting, he would later recount to friends, was unnerving. The tone was threatening, the questions ominous. And when Giwa returned home that day, he told his colleagues, "These people are up to something." Indeed, they were. On Saturday, October 18, Colonel Akilu phoned Giwa's house. He asked for directions. He said there was a package he wanted to deliver personally, a gesture that, on the surface, seemed benign. But this was no birthday card, no formal invitation. It was death disguised in an envelope. The next morning, at about 8:30 a.m., a parcel bearing the official seal of the Nigerian government was delivered to Giwa's home at 25 Talabi Street, Ikeja. It was labeled confidential, from the office of the president. Giwa, believing it to be an important communication, waited until about 10 a.m. to open it, in the company of Kayode Soyinka, a journalist and London bureau chief for Newswatch. The explosion was instantaneous. The blast tore through Giwa's chest, dismembering him. His last words, according to Soyinka, were, "Kayode, they've got me." The news broke like a thunderclap. A journalist had been assassinated in his own home, by a bomb, no less. The implications were staggering. If this could happen to Dele Giwa, then no one in Nigeria was truly safe. Not intellectuals, not activists, not ordinary citizens. Fear swept through the press community. Some papers temporarily shut down. Others censored themselves. And all eyes turned to the government for answers. But the response was vague, evasive, and deeply unsatisfying. The military government claimed it had nothing to do with the killing. The Ministry of Information said it was a regrettable incident but offered no details. The police launched an investigation but failed to secure the crime scene. Evidence was lost, suspects were not questioned, and no autopsy was conducted. Within days, it became clear there would be no official justice. But one man refused to let the case die, Chief Gani Fawehinmi, the legendary human rights lawyer. Fawehinmi began his own investigation, demanding that Akilu and Togun be questioned. He filed a suit in court, presenting evidence, including phone records and eyewitness testimony. But the state fought back with everything it had. Fawehinmi was harassed, arrested, and his law chambers were raided. Despite all obstacles, the public supported him. Demonstrations were held. Articles were written. And a singular question echoed across the land: who killed Dele Giwa? The courts, however, refused to compel Akilu and Togun to testify. The government blocked every attempt to bring them to account. And with time, the case lost momentum, buried under the weight of bureaucracy, fear, and a political elite determined to forget. In 1999, when Nigeria returned to civilian rule under President Olusegun Obasanjo, a new hope emerged. The Human Rights Violations Investigation Commission, also known as the Oputa Panel, was set up to probe atrocities committed under military rule. Dele Giwa's case was among them. The panel found that the Nigerian government had failed to investigate the murder. It recommended that Akilu and Togun be held accountable. But again, no action was taken. Nearly 4 decades later, no one has been convicted for the killing. No apology has been issued. And no compensation has been paid to Giwa's family. His widow and children still live with the memory, the loss, and the absence of closure. And so, the legend of Dele Giwa lives on, not just as a cautionary tale but as a rallying cry. He is remembered not merely for how he died but for how he lived, as a man who refused to compromise, a writer who held power to account, and a patriot who believed Nigeria could be better. His legacy is immortalized in journalism schools, awards, and monuments. Every October 19th, Nigerian journalists remember him, not with tears, but with resolve. For in his death, he taught a nation what it means to tell the truth in the face of danger. In the final analysis, the murder of Dele Giwa was not just the assassination of a man. It was an assault on the idea of a free press. It was the moment when silence became deadly. And it was the day Nigeria lost its most fearless voice. As long as journalists continue to write, question, and resist, Dele Giwa's spirit endures. And though justice may be delayed, it is never denied forever.